afternoon, everyone. I'm excited to kick off a little post-lunch discussion around ocean conservation. Surprisingly, the ocean is vastly overlooked when we're talking about climate change and the environment. And I think that Adrian here is going to have a ton of really amazing information to share. He's extremely knowledgeable on all things ocean preservation. He has a foundation, Lonely Whale, focused on the topic, and he's been an extremely vocal voice and activist in the space. So I think kind of a good place to start is if you just tell us a little bit about the work you've done with ocean conservation and Lonely Whale.
Yeah, well, you mentioned that the ocean is vastly overlooked, and I recognized that probably about 8 or 9 years ago when I first conceived of Lonely Whale. And climate, you know, it's at the forefront of global conversation, but the oceans are kind of second. And I found it to be a communications challenge to see how we could bring more awareness to the oceans. And partly it's because the oceans are so vast and they're so abstract and they're deep and they're dark and they're a little bit scary. And so I wanted to demystify the ocean and bring it into the everyday conversation. But unless you're living right on the ocean, it doesn't equate with our everyday experience. So it was not only a challenge, but an opportunity, really. And when I heard about the loneliest whale in the world, who's heard of the loneliest whale in the world? Nobody. Oh, okay. Okay, well, let me briefly recount the story. So there's a real whale, a real creature that migrates up and down the West Coast. And back during the Cold War, our government were laying down all these underwater microphones to track enemy submarines, and we inadvertently heard whales sing for the first time. That led to the Whale Song album. Y'all know that one? And that was the most printed album of all time. And it basically brought the underwater life of the ocean into public consciousness. And for the first time, we wanted to save whales. And it was, I think it was probably the first modern global environmental movement, which was the Save the Whales movement. Anyway, long story short, we also heard one particular frequency at 52 hertz, which is different than all other whales, and the government put a scientist on it to try and figure out what it was, and the scientist discovered that it was actually a lone whale, a solo whale. It was speaking at a uniquely different frequency than all other whales. So it became known as the loneliest whale because we know that whales are extremely sentient. They have spindle cells associated with consciousness. They're extremely social. They spend their whole lives in pods. And here's this one whale calling out constantly for connection, but never once receiving a response. And so my heart opened. And for the first time, like I could actually care about this species and this, like the ocean. I realized that this whale was an entry point to empathy for the ocean. And that's when we started Lonely Whale, not as an organization to fix the ocean or save humanity or any of that. It was a simple act of empathy and connection. So our mission is to bond people with the ocean, trusting that when people care, they'll cure, they'll make the right choices.
What would you say is kind of the average person's biggest misconception about the ocean?
Well, you know, movies like Jaws. I mean, look, media communications can inspire, but it can also make us retreat. And I think that's one thing, is that the ocean is, first of all, that it's scary, and also that it's infinite, that we can use it up and always have more. But, you know, I think we're starting to realize the limitations and the finite nature of nature itself. So I think that would be it.
Yeah. Well, you know, you mentioned the ocean is vast, and I think we all learned that stat in primary school, that the ocean is more than 70% of the Earth's surface, and, you know, 97% of the water in the world is housed in the oceans. So, you know, given that we're here at Climate Week, obviously the ocean would have a connection to the climate, but just how much of the health of the ocean is really tied to climate change?
Well, I mean, look, it's all connected, right? certainly. But one thing that we do need to recognize is the importance of ecosystem services on our way of life. And it's not just on land, but it's also in the ocean. I mean, we get every second breath from the ocean. So we literally, our ability to breathe comes from the ocean, but it also has the potential of sequestering a lot of carbon from the air, as well as a food source. I mean, 1 billion people feed off the ocean. So, you know, there's a lot of challenges that we need to consider because where are those 1 billion people going to eat if our fisheries collapse? What are we going to breathe if the ocean stops giving us oxygen? And also the carbon sequestration, as at a certain point it's going to max out, and then, you know, it won't be able to draw down any more carbon. So yeah, these are things that we need to think about. And the question was, how connected is it? Mm-hmm. Well, it's all connected, right? I mean, the ocean, I really love the ocean symbolically because it literally connects the entire world. It is our shared ocean. It isn't, you know, I mean, even though we name different areas of the ocean, Pacific, you know, Atlantic, et cetera, it's all one ocean. And in fact, we have this argument all the time. Is it save our oceans or save our ocean? Which is it? It's ocean.
Yeah, that makes sense. I hadn't actually thought about that before, but that was a good learning for today. You know, you mentioned carbon as one of the challenges sort of facing oceans right now and you know, being tied to the climate. What are some of the other sort of pollutants or major challenges that you see for our ocean health?
Yeah, well, Lonely Whale found itself really focusing in on plastic because that's the most glaringly obvious problem. And when I'd go out in the ocean, I went shark tagging with Sylvia Earle, for example, and we were out in the middle of nowhere, and yet there was so much plastic just hitting us in the face. So we got into that, and we were very interested in finding measurable solutions, because I've been doing environmental work for 20 plus years, and it's always a question is like, well, how do you know you're making a difference? And we really wanted to find a way to tackle the 8 billion tons of plastic that makes its way into the ocean. It's such a vast number, and that's one of the issues with the ocean. It's so big and overwhelming that people shut down because it's not accessible, it's not tangible. So what we did is we took that 8 billion tons of plastic and we reduced it down to a single unit of measure, the plastic straw. And we said, okay, if we can do straws, if we can get rid of straws from entering the ocean, maybe we can move up to the bottles and the glasses and all the rest of the plastic waste. And that's when we started the Stop Sucking Plastic movement. And we've, to date, removed 25 billion plastic straws from the waste stream. And it's really just, it's on some level it's symbolic, but it's a step in the right direction, and we can measure it. We can actually say, we've done this. And it really has shifted the way people perceive the issue, because they see how they interact with this material every single day through the plastic straw, and how easy it is to either decline the straw or find alternatives.
Yeah, I think that's such a great example. I know I, for one, stopped using plastic straws some years ago, especially when you hear about the sea turtles and how they can affect them as well. And I've also since, you know, stopped buying saran wrap and tried to put my leftovers in glass containers and all those little things we can do. But how much of an individual's impact is really making a difference on the ocean? I know a lot of times in mainstream thought, it's the corporations need to do something, the little people don't matter, but I think that's maybe a wrong thing to say. I would think that every little bit counts, right? Yeah, well, I was in the mindset, you know, my younger years, when I was young, as Rumi says, when I was clever, I tried to change the world, and now I'm wise, I try to change myself. I really do believe that the individual, the transformation of the individual is really going to make the biggest difference. It's a cultural change. How are we thinking about ourselves and the world? What do we want to build? How do we want to create the future? So I think that's important, and certainly existing companies need to make changes. But as a business person and entrepreneur, I'm very deeply compassionate for the realities that businesses have to go through in order to just stay afloat and you know, keep the lights on. I think the general public can be a little bit naive about, you know, what kind of changes can happen over what period of time. So I think it's this give and take between citizens,
you know, they're politicians and then business. But I do believe that individuals are the corner, they're the most important part because they provide the cultural energy for change. And together we have to imagine the future first and then try and build it while being sensitive to the trade-offs and the externalities that come with every choice that we make.
Yeah, I think to go back to the straws, I mean, I think of all the coffee shops that just changed up, you know, to the paper straws or now have a different sort of topper on their to-go
Well, since
cups.
COVID, they're all creeping back, you know. And look, if I may, excuse me, I don't mean to interrupt, but
no, go ahead.
Plastic is such a useful material. It's really transformed our way of life in I think, a positive way. And so there is this externality that we need to deal with. But I think in building, you know, functional circular economies, we can actually keep this material in the economy and out of the ocean. In fact, we've been building a supply chain through Loneliest Whale, where we've brought together a consortium of 15 and growing plus companies who have all agreed to buy what we call OBP, which is ocean-bound plastic. So this is mismanaged plastic waste around the world. Because once it's in the ocean, it's very expensive to retrieve and to filter and bring out. And then once it comes in on land, it's a degraded material and it's not very useful at that point. It's corrupted with salt and oxygen and sunlight and everything. So better to capture it before it enters the ocean and then upcycle it at that point. And so we've created this supply chain and we're getting companies to actually put in POs for this material so we can justify building the supply chain and paying pickers and waste collectors in these countries to actually retrieve it before it makes it out in the ocean.
That's great. And so once you retrieve the plastic waste and you're putting it back into a recyclable material, what are some of the things you can make with that plastic?
I mean, so many things. And that's the thing that we ask each company is to do an internal audit and figure out what use cases can they discover using plastic, and whether it be something that is core to their business, like Herman Miller makes chairs and they're putting it in their chairs. But it can also be something just within your everyday business, name tags, or office plates for names, you name it. I mean, every business can do an audit and be like, oh, you know what? We didn't even think about we're sourcing virgin plastic to make these things that we don't even think about. But upon doing the audit, we can actually use OBP because it fits.
Nice. That's really exciting, actually. I think that we were talking before about how people kind of demonize plastic, and there's actually a need for it, and there's a way to look at it in a positive light. So I love that as an example of how you're doing that. I think one of the other topics that we spoke about was just the constant sort of tension between wanting to find a solution to one problem, but in the process potentially creating another one. And so I think that kind of brings us to discussing sort of like wind farms. Offshore wind farms are obviously one of the top discussed points of renewable energy, right? But when you're putting those in the ocean, that might disrupt the ecosystem. So how do you sort of balance for thinking about that, being both a proponent of ocean conservation, but also wanting to find solutions to other sort of climate challenges that we have?
Yeah, I think healthy business competition will sort that out, in the long run. But I believe that we need as many solutions as there are humans on the planet. So everybody needs to participate, but also can we create healthy competition with different types of energy sources, renewable and otherwise, and rethink old sources of energy and how do we upgrade them so that they're more efficient. So I think, a lot of times people want simplicity, but I think we need to take our cue from nature. We need to recognize that complex systems are resilient. We need to be anti-fragile and start to think about how we can look at our challenges in an increasingly complex way instead of looking for that one panacea solution. And a lot of times the general public want that. They want the simplicity. They want to say, oh, renewable energy solved. It's like, that's not that easy because there's trade-offs to absolutely everything that we do. And do we have the courage to recognize and you know, and communicate that so that we can all come together and try and figure out how to reduce those externalities and those trade-offs.
Yeah, I know that, you know, in the next, I think something like 10 years, we're going to have a global demand for like 20% more electricity. You know, obviously just the population growing, also the world is getting warmer, and we want to turn on that AC a little bit more often. So what would you say are, you know, some positives to using wind energy to create that electricity?
Well, I've just recently moved to a ranch, and I have a windmill on my ranch, and I use it to, you know, pull up water from our well. And, you know, to me, I think not only having big projects, but also having very hyper-local, smaller projects where you can start to empower local communities to use wind and solar. And I think it'll have an easier footprint, and it'll be, and there's an education process to it. When people start to interact with it, and it's not this thing, this abstract thing over there, I think it'll start to increase not only adoption, but also our ability to actually implement it seamlessly into our lives.
How feasible is it to put a windmill on your property?
Well, I have 46 acres, so you know, for me it is. But when I was living in Brooklyn, maybe less so. But I did have solar in Brooklyn, even though, you know, as an early adopter, I am very much technology geek. I really certainly want to support technologies because I do believe that human ingenuity and human potential is what's going to allow us to evolve out of this moment. So I'm not cynical about it. I think, you know, there's this growing sentiment, this cynical sentiment in the you know, the environmental movement, which is anti-human, sort of. What are they? It's like I think it's called anarcho-environmentalists, where they believe that humans are the problem and we need to tamp down on, you know, human participation. And I think it's the opposite. You know, more humans, more of their intellectual, imaginative capability to create and manifest what's possible is going to get. I mean, and so I'm permaculture certified, and I highly recommend that if anybody hasn't looked into permaculture, to look at it as a systems design perspective on how humans are an important aspect of the ecosystem. So instead of trying to reduce your footprint and flog yourself for your very existence, maximize your handprint and go out there and build the world in a better way.
Yeah, that makes me think a lot. I grew up in California, and when I was a kid, you didn't see solar panels on every single house. And now, when I go home and visit my parents, they built a new house in a subdivision, and every house came with solar. Like, that was just standard across the board now. Do you think that windmills are going to kind of go that way in places where you actually have the space to put them up? Do you think more people will adopt them?
I didn't imagine that would be a possibility, but yeah, I mean, I think certainly where I live now, there's plenty of space for that. But I'm not so sure that they use them for electricity, but more for water. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. Anybody? Is that going to be a thing? Seems interesting.
Yeah, could be. Just making me think about it. But back to the ocean, since, you know, that's kind of why we're all here, you know, for this conversation. But what are some of like the major disruptors to sort of the sea habitat do you find from all of your work? What are some of the sort of major challenges that our ecosystems are facing beyond the plastics and beyond the carbon?
Yeah. Well, you know, I think that certainly we're doing too much fishing. We're too efficient in our ability to fish, for example. But if we work within the natural cycles, the ocean is so resilient. Nature is so resilient. So I think it's more just about giving the ocean a chance to revive itself, to replenish itself, and it will. But I mean, there's so much that is going on in the ocean. It's hard to focus on everything. But yeah, certainly if we look at our coastal lines as well, if we can replenish those, mangroves and other ocean like seaweed plants and that sort of thing, we can do a lot better with climate change as well. Because right now, because there's so much depletion, the ability for the ocean to sequester carbon is becoming less and less and less. So a lot of it is on land or like close to the land. So it's within actually our government's ability to regulate and to manage. A lot of times people think that overfishing is like out in the deep ocean. It's really a lot, the majority of it is within the jurisdiction of governments.
So what would you say are the ways that we can all kind of be more hands-on to sort of helping preserve these areas?
Well, I think one thing is we have to recognize that we own the ocean. It's ours. It's a collective resource. It's a common pool resource that we all own. Nobody technically owns it. I mean, certainly on the coast we manage it, our governments manage it, but we own it. It is ours. So when we come together and we recognize, I mean, and when somebody wants to dump trash in your yard, you do something about it, right? Well, the ocean is no different. It's just sometimes hard to imagine that it's ours because it's so far away. So I think that's one of the challenges, is how do we get people to connect more and recognize that it is theirs and that they have a right to protect it?
Yeah, so how can, the individual who, is running their own company or a part of a larger corporation kind of help empower those around them and their organizations to do more as well?
Yeah, I think certainly making the effort to just bring up the conversation, make it a priority. And, some of these issues just people aren't thinking about, and I do believe that when we put our heads together and we talk about them, we'll find those solutions. And you need not only, it's the political will, right? But politics is downstream of culture, so we need the cultural will as well. We need to imagine what's possible within ourselves. And I'd like us to move out of the outrage moment of environmentalism and move into a more optimistic place where we recognize that we have all the capability, we have all the resources to actually make incredible change in the world.
Yeah, and so how would you what kind of advice would you give someone on how to start that conversation in a way that's not going to be like inflammatory or get people really riled up?
Yeah, given how divided we are as a country and globally on some level, it's not easy, and it requires a certain humbleness, right? That one thing I've seen in environmentalism as of late is this arrogance. There's this surety that they have the answer and they know what the solution is. And when you come at it from that perspective and you're not willing to learn and you're not remaining curious, you're not able to see your blind spots and you're not able to open up to new possibilities. So you'd be surprised at the person that you perceive as an enemy might have something that will inspire you to find a better solution. And I've found that, like I grew up in New York, and I would fly over the rest of the country to LA and back and forth and kind of squirm as I was going over to the flyover states because of how they voted or something like that, or how they were environmentally. And now I am learning so much living in Texas from the farmers on how to be more in line with the environment. So I would recommend it's not just about talking. It's also about being in nature and getting connected to the earth. And you learn a lot from just that very practice of being connected to nature.
Yeah, so, you went from being coastal to now being in the middle of the country. And then I think, you have Lonely Whale and discussing the ocean, but then now you're also working with Earth Speed and focused much more on the farmlands. What are some of the similarities between the two to kind of help maybe someone who is in the middle of the country really understand the ocean by, comparing it to something that they do understand intimately?
Yeah, so I'm a reformed environmentalist in that I used to poo-poo and wag my finger at farmers for the practices that they, glyphosate or, factory farming and that sort of thing. And now having had the experience of doing it myself, I recognize why it is that those practices have come to be in the first place, because it's hard, it's really difficult. So now I'm in a place of learning, and I hope to be able to contribute to that industry and figuring out new ways and experimenting and exploring and being a laboratory of how we can do farming better and how we can care for the land better. And I recognize I may fail at that, or I may, come up short, but to put myself in the place, in the willingness to try, I think is the first step. A lot of times people want the solution. They want to defer the power to the government to decide. They want to, make companies do the right thing, but they're unwilling to, meet the challenge themselves. But we need your brain power. We need your passion. We need every individual to join the conversation and be a part of this in a very real way, because then you're just going to be, complaining about what the solution was, and that's not where we need to be. We need to be in a place where we're all coming to the table, because this is our collective world. So.
Yeah, and it's about balance too, right? I think to enact the technological solution, we have to understand what that's going to cause or succeed at, and then, plan accordingly, right? To kind of put that in place, because, that outcome is going to be more positive for us, even if the journey to get there has a few side effects, right? Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, absolutely. But I think the side effects are, the opportunities. Like, that's where we can improve. And so a lot of times we don't want to see, that we just want to accept the solution as being so we can shut down, so we can tune out again. We solved it, so now we can go back to, Instagramming or something like that. But this is going to be a forever, way of being, is where we're constantly shifting and moving to adapt with the world as it evolves. And that's really what Earth speed is sometimes don't go slow for the solution, just making a decision, but really take your time and recognizing you really don't want to move faster than you're able to evolve. Because sometimes the decisions that you make are going to bite you in the ass. And so we make a lot of mistakes by moving fast.
So I know we don't have that much time left, and I don't want to just be harping on all the challenges and all the negative talk about, what we're facing as humanity. But, as society overall, though, we have had a lot of successes when it comes to caring for our oceans and caring for our planet. So what would you say have been sort of the biggest positives you've seen in a shift for how we're viewing climate change in the world in recent years?
Yeah, well, certainly it's now the ocean, as well as the climate, is at the forefront of our minds. It is right there on the main stage, if you will, which I'm really happy about, and I feel like I helped contribute to that. And here we go. You're just watching it unfold. I mean, look here in New York City during Climate Week, the amount of players coming to the table, wanting to participate, the amount of capital that is starting to flood, this industry, and a lot that, money's energy. And so I'm really excited to see what we're going to create over the next several years. And again, maybe naively an optimist, but I really believe that we're going to see a lot of really positive changes over the next decade.
And what would you say is your next venture?
I'm still a humble apprentice of the earth and the soil. I started Earthspeed, which is a media company platform for not only inspirational content, but also a marketplace for nature-based living. So that's really what I'm focused on in the next several years.
That's really great. And I think, I guess we have a few minutes or two. If anybody has any questions, we'll definitely open it up. No?
Nailed it.
You guys know everything about the planet already.
I love your speed, and this idea of like positive messaging and how that can help drive change and kind of inspiration.
Yeah. Well, what I've discovered is the next stage for me, and what I think collectively what we need is people to be more self-reliant and take a little bit more responsibility for themselves and each other, and build the capacity to take responsibility. And I recognize living in New York for my whole life, I was really being taken care of by all these systems. And then after COVID, you recognize, you know, a lot of our systems are like centralized systems are fragile. So I really wanted to build the ability to take care of myself and my family and my community as best as I can. And it's empowering. It's an exciting next step for me. So I want to really offer the tools to recognize how to live closer to nature, but also how to build that kind of resilience and that self-reliance so that we're not so reliant on governments or external systems to protect us or take care of us. So that's really what it looks like. And when you start doing that, then you can actually, you're not in fear so much. You can actually start to step out and contribute more effectively with the world.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian, for these very inspiring words. You talk about something which is, of course, all company must care, that saying that infinite growth is over and that we need to think in a more regenerative type of economies where recycling is the only way to do things. I really love your words on permacultures. And the main question is, how can we put a constraint, a real constraints to companies and citizens to really make it happen? Because we've seen that all nations have been able to get organized facing COVID pretty fast, pretty aligned, but we have difficulties to get organized on these climate risks because it's not immediate. So what should we do about it? How to really keep surging the topic to every citizen and every company? Should we put a carbon quota?
You said subsidies?
Companies.
Okay.
Companies. Should we put a carbon quota to limitation to companies, a carbon quota or limitation for citizens? What should we do to spinning up the change?
Well, I guess I would push back personally on this need for speed. I think there's an artificial timeline that's been imposed by a certain number of people about how fast we need to work, and you know, if we don't, we're all going to die. To me, that feels like doomsday talk, and we know all the people over time who've said the end is nigh have all been wrong. So I'm an earth speed guy. I'm a lifestyle in the cadence of nature, and nature doesn't rush. So first of all, I'd offer a reframe. Don't worry, because the worry and the fear will actually corrupt what we create and how. So first and foremost, it's a mindset from my perspective. And then once we can start to recognize that we are emergent from nature, we are part of nature. Nature birthed us, created us. So we have within us the ability to learn and adapt, and that is what makes us special as human beings. We come out unfinished so that we can adapt to the world and evolve, and we have an elasticity so that we can be creative. So I would say, let's put more resources, more minds, more energy into what we can build without the constraint of fear of time.
It's a great answer and a great closing. So thank you so much for sharing all your insights today. I feel like I picked up a few tips along the way. I'm excited to check out more about Earth Speed as well. But thank you all for having us.
Thank you.